Good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. This is Josh. I'm going to be your presenter today. It's promptly 11:30 a.m. Eastern Time. We're going to go ahead and get started on our topic momentarily. Our topic today is church windows accounting, credit memo versus or refund webinar. Okay. What we're trying to do is to clarify with today's event what is posted in church windows accounting when you receive a credit, typically from a vendor for any reason, typically, okay? In my experience, I've been doing this, folks, almost 23 years, in my experience, we've purchased something from a vendor payee, we then return it later for credit. Not always, but in my experience, that's the most common reason, okay? Is we've spent money to purchase something, then we return that, and we're getting a credit from a vendor because of that, and the purchase is no longer valid, essentially. Okay, and so really the question boils down to in this case, and this is where this comes up, is when we go into enter bills. All right, I'm going to get out my highlighter here, introduce that today. So right here in our, we've got our, enter bills window, but right here between the amount column and the line item comments, we have this column called CR memo, okay? Credit memo, all right? That is the field that we would use, or we'll use that when we receive a credit from a vendor that does not affect the bank, okay? We've not received any money to physically deposit in our checking account. We're simply receiving merchandise credit, or, commonly like a credit on our credit card statement, okay? Unless I ask my credit card company later to say maybe refund me in the form of a check or a deposit into my checking account, I'm simply receiving a credit towards future purchases on my credit card balance, okay? That, folks, I'm going to go through specific examples of both of these, is the fundamental difference between whether we use credit memo under enter bills here, or we go to enter income, which I'm going to show here in a little bit, when we have received something we can physically deposit, okay? But in any case, that's the true difference between which one of these options we choose and which one we don't use, is did I receive something I can deposit into my bank account? Is cash being affected? If it is, this is not going to be the way to go, okay? So in today, we're going to say we returned something to a particular vendor that we made a purchase for in February on our Chase Bank Visa card, okay? We're not receiving anything being deposited. We're just showing it as being applied to our credit card balance, okay? We purchased a new printer back in February to our miscellaneous office expense account, and we're now going to, and I'm going to show that here. So let's go right up here to browse. Let's go to change here, filter and sort. We're going to go Chase Bank Visa, and right here, here's my bill in February for that, and right here I see that I received or purchased or spent $78.90 against my miscellaneous office expense account for the purchase of a new printer. An inexpensive printer, but a printer nonetheless, okay? So I need to now return that item. For whatever reason, it wasn't working for us, and we've now received a credit back from the vendor on that onto our Chase Bank Visa account. So we need to now record that. So we're going to go back to enter bills, and here we are. We're in March. I now choose my Chase Bank Visa. Here we go, and I can put in here, transaction or line item comments if I wish. Right here, I'm going to find that $510,495 miscellaneous office expense. I'm going to put the $78.90 worth in there, and I'm going to put a check mark in the box CR or credit memo. Check that, and now notice here what it's done now to my Chase Bank Visa total here. It shows it as a negative, or it's negative or credit a balance of $78.90. Okay? So now I would add that, put this for return printer, printer for credit, and then done add to batch. Okay. Now I can go up now, and if I have other Chase Bank Visa charges for, say, the month of March or February to March statement now, I can go ahead and enter those just like I would normally. So if I go, okay, I've made some purchases for the church's library, and then I do some more charges. Let's say I do bulletins. I've made some bulletins here for, $100. And, I'm just continuing to add all of those expenses that are now new charges on my credit card balance. Okay, let's add one more here. Let's do music material, $250. And now notice that when I now click done, add to batch, okay, and I go to show running balance up here, my new transaction effect is the adjusted balance of the 9/11/10, which is the exact amount that I now owe on my current Chase Visa, Bank Visa. The credit has been applied. Okay, I can now post this bill and it nets out to exactly what I owe. I work with people all the time on support calls. They go, oh, well, don't I need to adjust my current month's charges for the amount of the credit? No. All you need to do is do exactly what we're doing here. Enter the amount of the credit, okay, and enter the amount of the current purchases, and it all nets out to the same total. Sorry, there must have been something else in that. Oh, my current balance on my Chase Bank Visa was the 2066. So it did adjust it either way by the amount of the 7890. Sorry, folks. So that 7890 credit has now been taken in or factored into my current balance. Now the balance that's waiting in that account has the credit applied, is exactly what I go. I'm ready to move on. Above and beyond that, the actual expense account that I credited for the miscellaneous office expenses, okay, let's go back to our show running balance window. Right here, miscellaneous office expenses, let me get out my highlighter. Right here, had a balance of $1,066.55, now reduced by $78.90. The actual true expense for the year is the $987.65. So this credit has done exactly what I needed and I wanted it to do. Credited back to my Visa credit card account and had the effect of properly reducing the expense account balance for the year to what the actual correct total is. Okay? No cash is affected here. Okay? I could now save this batch or post it or post and pay it, and that credit's been applied. Okay? All right. So now we're shifting from a credit memo, again, no bank, no cash account has been affected, is now we're going to say, our example is we paid our property insurance for the first 6 months or first quarter of the year in February, and now due to we've now made upgrades to our fire prevention and protection system in the church building, and so the insurance company has now sent us a refund check for reduced premium. Okay, so they verified that we're now less of a fire risk, so we've now gotten a credit for the insurance payment that we made for the first quarter of 2025, and similarly, we need to make an adjustment for that. And we've got to get it onto our bank recs. So if I go back to my change year, filter, and sort, and I type in my vendor, be sure you're covered insurance, and click OK. Here is my bill for February 20th for the $3614.80. Okay, when I view that transaction, I now have to reduce my property insurance balance by the $876.54 credit, but I've also now got to get it back in my bank account because they physically sent me a check. Okay, or whether it doesn't matter. Either way, however it was paid is really irrelevant. Whether it was EFT and they deposited it into my account doesn't really matter. Okay, I just have to get the expense reduced and get it into my asset account for my bank reconciliation as a deposit. And how I do that is I go right to Enter Bills, right in the middle here. Let me get out my highlighter right here under enter bills or under transactions, and enter bills here in the upper left, or not enter bills, enter income. I'm sorry. Let's back up a step, folks. Sorry. Let's get rid of my drawing and redirect that. Enter income right here, okay? Or right up here under enter income, okay? That's where I'm going, not enter bills, enter income. I apologize. All right, so we go to enter income. I'm going to enter the date occurred that I'm actually depositing the check at the bank. Okay, so I'm going to say I received that yesterday on Monday. I'm now going to the bank today to deposit that. So I choose whatever date I'm depositing it. I can choose a payment method if I wish. If you want to include the actual item on a Church Windows deposit slip, then you have to choose the payment method, whatever payment method it is. And I believe, yeah, it looks like the EFT doesn't have an option, but you could print on deposit slip is an option when you choose cash or check. It's not when it's any of those other three options. Okay, so cash or check does allow you to be able to enter a choose or check or print on deposit slip. I can now, enter transaction comments, refund for premium credit Q1 2025. Okay. So here, and this is the part that I think folks often overlook, is it says, folks, right here, notice it says income/expense/liability account. Yes, while most income will credit an income account, you can credit both to not only income, but to an expense 500 account, or you can credit it to a liability account. All right. So in our case, we are crediting back to our property insurance. So we're going to type in property. There's our property insurance expense. And we're going to put in our $876.54. And I can even attach a document if I want to this that shows this if I scanned it. And then if I click now done, add to batch. And again, before I move on and do this, I want to show you folks is, of course, notice up here's income. Here's my expense, and as I go down, notice my vendors all appear, anything under liabilities, and my actual liability accounts will appear there, okay? So in this case, we are choosing our property insurance, but you can credit a 4, a 5, or a 2, or a vendor, okay? And now when I click Done, Add to Batch, again, I'm going to use my Show Running Balance button here in the upper right, folks. Again, if many of you have worked with me on the phone, I use Show Running Balance all the time. It simply ensures that the transaction is having the desired effect that I want on the accounts before I post it, okay? And so it allows me to minimize my mistakes and means I don't have to go back in and have to search for and find the transaction and correct it later if I can just use this to show it. So now if I click Show Running Balance, we now show that my Huntington Bank checking is now increased by the $876.54, and my property insurance expense, which had $72.29.60 as the current balance, reduced by $876.54. The year-to-date or adjusted balance now total is down to $63.53.06. So it is having the desired effect on the expense by reducing that because I have not paid as much for my property insurance as I had. So it's correcting that for my treasurer's report. And again, just by way of a reminder, it is now going to be appearing as a deposit on my bank reconciliation for me to clear to match what it shows as the deposit on the bank statement for that month. So now I would simply click on Post, and I don't want to print the transaction, but that is now showing up and having the effect that I'm wanting on the accounts, folks, okay? So again, just by way of a friendly reminder, asking yourself the question is the credit that I'm receiving from the vendor, is it something I'm physically depositing and affecting my asset accounts in the form of a deposit, or am I simply receiving merchandise credit against my credit card or with the vendor itself? That determines whether you go to enter income, or you go to enter bills and use the credit memo. If cash is not affected, you go to enter bills and use the credit memo. If cash is affected, you do not go to enter bills, you go to enter income and record the credit there. Okay? Now, some of you may be asking yourself the question, well, what if the transaction isn't in the same year as, say, the expense account? So like maybe I made a purchase in December and I returned the item in January. So I don't want to necessarily go back into, say, 2024 and post that credit. So I wouldn't credit the expense account there. If I really, really wanted to post it in a different year, I wouldn't go to enter income, folks. I would go up to other transactions and I'd post a journal entry, and the journal entry would credit the fund and debit the asset, okay, my 300 account. Okay, this way I'm not affecting or distorting my treasurer's report in a different year for an expense that was in a prior year, okay? But that's really the only deviation from what we've talked about in the event here today, is if I really don't want to affect an expense and it's a credit from something a while ago or in a prior accounting year, don't want to affect treasurer's report in 25 for that if it was charged to the expense in 24. So I would credit the fund in this case under using a journal entry instead of the expense 5 for that. All right, folks, so that is where we are going to leave our topic for today.